Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Patient Convert podcast. We have our guest today is Tracy Cherpeski, and she's joining us to talk about a really popular topic, but one that I myself need to learn a little bit more about, and one that I think a lot of the physician listeners out there are really going to relate to, and that is physician burnout. And there's a lot around this topic. So, Tracy, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay, thank you. First, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the time and the opportunity. I love what I do, so I'll try to be, pithy. I'm an executive coach and business consultant. I work exclusively with physician and provider owners and sometimes their teams, and we really help our clients take back a day a week minimum of their time to apply to anything else they want to be doing. And that involves a whole spectrum of work that needs to be done in the background, including usually I'm working with their director of operations or the practice manager. And we coach, we consult, we, you know, love on them and browbeat when necessary and really focus on their bigger goals and help them achieve them.
So, where does it start for you? Are these physicians coming to you and saying, I'm absolutely exhausted? What are some of the trigger words that you hear them say? So, any of our listeners out there that may be saying some of this, maybe they are really realizing that they're being burned out or they're starting to experience physician burnout and they don't even know it.
Yeah, right now I think it's actually a bit of an epidemic because of the pandemic and just even if my clients aren't frontline, COVID responders and all of that, they're still everything's changing so quickly. The regulations are changing. There's so much that's happening at a really rapid clip. Of course, they're losing a lot of staff if they're burning out as well. The word burnout, it's interesting in my industry, we're getting tired of hearing it, but it's the word that people really understand. And so the clients are coming to me either by referral or they've just found me through other channels saying, okay, I love what I do. We're successful. They're making money. And it's interesting that that's the word that they tie to money, right? Oh, we're making money, so we're successful. But, our turnover is 20, 30% or whatever high. And I'm exhausted and I'm waking up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., cold sweats, having dreams. One of my clients said, I have a dream almost every night during the week that my actual company is a monster and it's swallowing me whole.
Ooh.
That is not a good place to be
No.
as a business owner. And, we do start out with, do you really want to keep this practice? Because I think that's really important. And that's the coaching side of things is getting really, really crystal clear about what's most important to them and what they really want. It's the part that really is the most important piece of the work that I do. And it's the one that most physicians especially don't really care for. So I warn them, you're probably not going to like me for the first month because I'm going to make you slow way down until we get all the details that we need to move forward with the work.
That makes a lot of sense. What would you say on the time side, and it could be a top three, or there could be one singular thing in your experience that is the biggest time theft for physicians, or again, a top three that they need to be mindful of and watch for that you typically find when you engage with a client that is kind of being suffocated by the business?
I think it's probably two major things. The first one is actual busyness and how much energy that robs people of. And then the other, you're welcome in advance, listeners, is the lack of desire to release control. And sometimes lack of ability because, here's the truth, whatever their training is, if they're in the integrative and complementary, if they've gone straight through medical school, I'm not sure how many operations and business courses there are in medical training programs.
Not
Right?
not enough,
So
that's for sure.
I think almost none.
Mhm.
So unless they grew up in a family business and they already know how that works, or, they've had some kind of an experience, that's a piece of the puzzle. Like being a business person, wearing that hat can be really challenging. So that's, I think, oftentimes the difficulty with letting go.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, so when you're working with these physicians and they've contacted you and they're aware they're burned out, what are some of the first steps you take with them and their staff, or maybe it's just with them to kind of get them back on track? And
We
get that time?
always, yeah, we always start with time, how they're managing their time. And then I slash time management as a phrase completely because management implies some kind of control. And we really don't have control over time. We have control over how we lead ourselves through our time. So I use the phrase time leadership, which in the green room I was saying to you, I learned as an engineering term, but it applies really nicely to the work that I do, which is oversimplified, sort of high level, just prioritizing the tasks that are most important. We learn a lot about delegation, hiring, that comes way later. But the initial, where we really start is with time leadership. And I use all kinds of, tools to do that. But one, can I share a tool? 'Cause I think it's actually really useful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd love that.
I call it the time leadership quadrant. And it's just, here I'm drawing a rectangle with a cross through it. And if you look at that for the listeners, like go ahead and grab something and draw because this will be really helpful to have the visual. But the top left hand quadrant is A. And those are things that need to get done today. For the physician or provider owner, that's going to have to be several different categories because how many hats are they wearing during the day?
Mhm.
But if we're just looking at like business operations, I can simplify it that way. So it's the top 3 to 5, maximum 5 things that need to be complete today. If it's something that's in progress, you go over to quadrant B, which is the top right, and that's like within a week. And so you may on a daily basis move over a piece of B to A to complete it. And then the lower left-hand quadrant is C, and that's a longer term. And right now, everything's changing so quickly that unless it's like a huge project or a build out or something like that that they're working on, I limit that to maybe 3 months. And that's like, what are these bigger projects or things that we're working on or goals that we have that we want to, work on? And then you might move some of those tasks up to be on your weekly thing and then daily move things over. And the lower right hand is D, which is really 3 Ds. And it's do it now to get it out of the way because it's driving you nuts and it's always on your mind and it's draining your energy. Delegate it or delete it. So it's really useful. You don't have to always draw that and, look at it every day, but it's really useful to just run through in your mind, like, okay, is this an A, B, C, or D? Like, what's really important here? Is it important or is it urgent? That's another question to ask to even simplify it more.
I love that.
That's
That's fabulous. Yeah, to really kind of
everybody can.
visualize that and kind of
Yeah.
force someone to organize. I mean, I'm not a physician, but that would help me as well,
Oh, totally. I mean, before I was working exclusively with physicians, I used it with all of my business leaders. Like, listen, this is the thing that will save you so much agony. Because if you can I don't compartmentalize well. So
Mhm.
if I have some kind of a visual or a system, a 1, 2, 3 on my fingers or something that helps me like put things in their place and then just close the lid on the things that are coming later, at least then I can shift gears and focus.
I think my
And I
favorite
think,
was the D. I like
mhm.
that.
Oh yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
Do it now, delegate it, or delete it?
Yeah, and
I
around the
like that.
holidays, ditch it and have a party, like, just go.
I love that.
That's great. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that would help a lot of people, even just thinking about D in general and trying to think as a physician how much they have to do in a day and what to delegate. So, on the
Yeah.
topic of delegation, when you're in this process with them and they're trying to reserve that time and retraining their brain on how important to have their own time is, when it comes to delegation, what are some of the biggest hurdles physicians face, and what is some of the greatest advice or steps that you give them to overcome it?
I think some of the hurdles are if they're I don't work with startups generally, but if they're still kind of a new practice or they're in a huge growth phase and they have older systems that they're bringing into their new sort of it either happens with number of people who work in the practice or the number of dollars they're making in revenue. But usually there's a big jump around 1 to 3 million in revenues that gets the private practice owner sort of twisted. And they can't be in charge of everything. And I know that in medical training, you're taught never to let them see you sweat. If you're questioning something, you don't let your patient see that. And so it comes out in the coaching where my clients will say something like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'll go, oh, now we're making progress. This is really good to admit that because if you've never run a business before, how would you know what to delegate and what to send out besides maybe, the typical things like billing or coding and things like that. But sometimes it's like the simple little things like trying to be the person who's managing your team. That seems like a leadership thing, but there's a difference between leadership and management. And so one of the things we work on is the mindset around delegation and thinking like a CEO rather than thinking like a manager. The manager moves a lot of parts. The CEO is more visionary. And there I'm like, lifting up a few levels. And that's a challenge because, except for maybe what's delegated to a nurse or a CNA or something like that, the doctor's there. That's what they're doing.
Mhm.
And so it's just the way they're wired up is to tackle and sometimes block and tackle and do all the things that need to be done. But from a business perspective, this is incredibly draining and it's part of it's actually a huge contributor to burnout.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's a little unique in that space, at least how I would imagine it is. A lot of individuals say, like ourselves, as we started and built our business, is you're really trying to get to a goal. And like my father does a ton on leadership, and at a point in his career in his 70s where he's retired, he spends 95% of his time doing the things that fill his cup up that he's really good at and he loves. Early
Mhm.
on in our career, when we were starting the business out, we spent about 20% of our time doing that because we were literally just trying to put fires out and create an infrastructure. Physicians are unique because they come out of fellowship and it's like 90% when they're working at a hospital, but then you start your business and that can get whittled very far down. And so you're not filling your cup up, but you're also not spending enough time on what you're the most proficient at, what you've been trained on, and what you make the most money on. And that's obviously the patient care side. And so what you're talking about, it sounds like, is kind of working to get back to that by delegating. It's getting the right people on the right seats on the bus and get that time back that you had probably in residency, in fellowship, and coming out of training so you can be fulfilled in what you're doing.
So it sounds
Absolutely.
like, too, a lot of this relies on kind of who they have in place currently. I know with marketing, we run into this too. And with physician liaison marketing, it's a referral marketing that I do. All of a sudden, you kind of turn over these things and you start seeing what could be fixed and who's in charge of this. And so running into that as a physician, you have your main admins or who you rely on. I'm sure as a consultant, this can be something that comes up to you that maybe they're not the right fit for the position. Or I know even running our own business, without our COO, who we adore, you need that person who's on your side, who has your
Mhm.
back, who's organized. So how do you train a staff member that didn't sign up for this, that wasn't the one that reached out to you, but is a huge part of this process and this transformation for the physician?
I've been really fortunate to work with people who are really lovely humans and their staff love them. So it's not been that difficult to bring the practice managers or whatever their title might be, their right hand person into the fold and even be open to coaching and being coachable. One of my clients that I'm working with right now, it's been such a beautiful transformation because their practice more than doubled during COVID while they switched everything to almost 100% remote, but they still have two physical locations. And so the practice manager is managing a team that more than doubled from the time that she arrived there to now. And 90% of them are remote, but they still have two physical locations where people come in for testing and, they have a couple of admin staff there. And for them, that has just been like they want it so badly and they really care about what they do and they're really committed to the founder. And so, I mean, I've been really fortunate that way. I haven't run into resistance. I did have another client where we started to work with their practice manager and I just had to say privately, this person's not a fit. They're not as committed as you need them to be and they also just don't have the skill set and it could be learned, but I don't think you have the time
Yeah.
to wait.
Yeah.
And that's tough for any
Mhm.
consultant.
And
Oh,
and
it's
what
not
we
my favorite part.
and what I've seen firsthand in the marketing side of things in terms of the practices that are really doing it well, the physicians seem really fulfilled and they're on an incredibly strong growth trajectory is really that makeup of we hardly ever see the physicians involved in the meetings and they
Mhm.
have a point person in-house. And obviously this varies with size, but there's always a person that they have empowered to make the decisions on their behalf when it comes to the marketing. And that is always by far the best situation in terms of everybody being able to get stuff done for the betterment of the business. And the ones that 99% of the time, in fact, it's pretty much 100% of the time, having this business now for 10 years, is when the physicians are heavily involved on the monthly Zoom meetings, there's just not much progress made in general. It's a waste of
Yep.
their time. It's a waste of our time. It's a waste of the person that's sitting on the Zoom that's empowered, but not really. And it's being able to release that and know that you've got somebody that can make those decisions. And then you can come in quarterly or semi-annually and obviously help with strategic decision making.
And this comes back to clarity, right? This is what we work on in the beginning. Time is always the first thing because it's the biggest pain point. But the next is, how are you communicating with your team? And in the world of, I came from the corporate world, communication has this bit, I don't know, we use the word a lot and then we don't really understand what it means. But does your team understand what your mission and your vision is? And are they connected to it in some way? And have you empowered them to make decisions on your behalf? And within reason, right? There's always going to be bumpers and boundaries around that, but that's a huge piece of it. If the owner themselves is unclear, then that just makes for a really challenging pass off and delegation. Coming back to delegation, like if your team doesn't understand what it is that you want to do, they'll get very mixed results or inaction because of a fear of whatever, getting it done, retribution, making a mistake, or any list of things that they might be concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some other tips or strategies that you use for your physicians to help them really integrate this new time management system?
So we go through a process. It's got like 3 pillars. And the first pillar is discovery. And that's the slow down, take all the puzzle pieces, lay them out, move them around, see if there are any that don't belong there, and then build a new picture. That's my favorite part. It's usually my client's least favorite part until it's finished. They like done.
Yeah, I get that too. Even what I do,
yeah.
My favorite is the discovery, and it is their least favorite for sure.
It's slowing down. Like what? Who has time for that? We're taught to hustle and grind. So it's really, that's a challenge, but it's also incredibly informative. It's enlightening and it's liberating for the physician. Big time, because then they start to understand, oh, I don't actually need to do that. So then we analyze and we go through and analyze, like figure out if you can, how you spend every 15-minute block of every day over the course of a couple of weeks. Just write it down, make a note, voice note, whatever, and then go back and look at it. And we don't like to put dollar signs over our patients' or clients' heads, but for the purposes of this work, we have to do it. They have to put their hands all over their numbers and understand. So how much are they costing their practice? So let's say their hourly rate, just for round numbers, is $200, and they're spending 15 minutes, 3-4 times a day. So up to 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever per day, doing things that don't belong on their plate because they think it's faster or whatever. And they just haven't looked at it that way. But there's one is they could have seen more patients, or they could have had other earning opportunities, or they could have gone and worked on something like a talk or something where they're going and establishing themselves as an expert in their field. And then the final step would be to take, I call it inspired action. But what does that mean, right? It's not just what lights you up, because sometimes we just got to get stuff done. Like we all have tos, and there's not much we can do about that. But if we can understand the benefit of getting those things done, now that's an inspired action step.
I like that. I love all the terminology. I love it. It's definitely so enlightening. And I know so many physicians out there can relate to some of these feelings of, just being stuck, or like you said, just even admitting being stuck. Or I think my favorite part though was when you said, because they think they can do it faster, or they think this is better. And in reality, it's actually not. It's slowing everything down and costing them time and money.
Yeah. And even my clients who are not, money driven, they're community practices or whatever, I'm still like, yeah, but if you are, I'm not a finance person. I stay in my lane. I bring people. I have a nice bench of people. So if they need a financial strategist, I bring that person in to do that piece. But broad strokes, if you're losing money, but you're making higher revenues than you ever have before, but you're still barely breaking even, I guarantee one piece of it is time. One piece of it is time at least. So if I can help, patch those holes, then we can bring the financial analyst in to look at everything and go over their books and find where the other leaks are. But so much of it is time, because time, it really literally in business, time is money.
Oh, absolutely. I have a good friend who's a surgeon, and she loves what she does, but time is killing her. In fact, she had to go back to the practice and be like, the schedule is not working. I'm not even being able to do what I trained so hard in my fellowship and my residency for. And she's going in at 5 or 6 a.m. and coming home around 11 p.m. and then back
Yeah.
up the next day.
1 a.m. a couple days ago.
And then on call, how many times a month?
Probably 10.
Yeah.
8 to 10
And then, so it's really complicated and really wears them out. And then when they have the days off or the weekends off, they want to be with their family, but then, their family has it all planned out because they don't ever get time with them. So I just feel like even their time off isn't time off, you have a birthday party here, you have this for your son. And so I think it's stressful and it's really dangerous. It puts a lot of stress on their health and what they do and can live a very short life that way. It's dangerous.
Oh, for sure. So
Yeah.
anything I'd be curious. I know, again, this is not the lane that you spend most of your time, but obviously we focus so heavily on marketing from a topical standpoint on the podcast. So I always like to try to include that as part of the conversation and some takeaways. And you have a unique vantage point because you're really coming into these practices. And I'm sure a lot of them are having that conversation of, I either want to grow, but as I grow, I get more stifled, or I'm not been able to grow because I simply just don't have the time and the resources to do it. Anything that you've seen on the marketing side, whether it's bringing in outside resources, or they are usually doing this, that, or another, that you could lend as a piece of advice in terms of what you see as a consultant on the outside looking in?
Absolutely. Number one, hire a professional for your marketing. They may not have to do all of your posts or whatever, but at the very least have a consultation and get a content calendar going, and then train someone on your staff. If it's not a large hospital center that has a CMO, right? Anybody who knows how to use a computer and a smartphone can figure out how to post to social media. So if you have some support with the actual content, then, that can get out there, and whoever's going to write your blogs or whatever. Like if you don't have that in-house, outsource it. Find a reputable agency that will learn your voice and share the topics and really get it out there, because, I have a marketing specialist on my bench also. So we have lots of conversations. So while this is not my lane, I understand the importance of having the marketing piece in place. Somebody can say, oh, can you recommend a dentist? And there could be a dentist less than a mile from your house. But if you've gone and tried to find them online and there's no reviews and they don't have